The frozen child. A deadly storm howled across the icy wasteland. The wind roared like a wild beast, throwing sharp ice against the frozen ground. Snow swirled in every direction, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The temperature was deadly, cold enough to freeze skin in seconds. Ethan Carter pulled his thick coat tighter around his body. His breath came out in white clouds, vanishing into the air as quickly as they appeared. His thermal suit kept him warm, but even that had limits. He had been walking for hours, searching for shelter before the storm got worse. His scanner beeped weakly, showing no sign of any safe place nearby. He was alone, or so he thought. Then, through the deafening wind, he heard something. A sound that did not belong to the storm. A faint, high-pitched noise. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on his ears. But then it came again. A cry. Ethan stopped walking. He listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the direction. The sound was weak, almost swallowed by the wind, but it was real. He wasn't imagining it. Someone, or something, was out here. His instincts told him to keep moving, to get to safety first. But his gut told him otherwise. No one could survive in this storm for long. If someone was crying, they were in serious trouble. Taking a deep breath, Ethan turned toward the sound. He forced his way through the thick snow, pushing against the wind. Each step was slow and heavy. The storm fought against him, trying to push him back. But he kept going. The crying grew louder. Finally, after what felt like forever, he saw a small shape curled up against a frozen rock. At first, he thought it was just a pile of ice-covered cloth. But then the shape moved. Ethan's heart pounded. He stepped closer. It was a child. Or at least it looked like one. The small figure was shivering, covered in ice and snow. Its thin, delicate body trembled violently. Its skin was pale blue, and its large, glowing silver eyes were filled with tears. It was not human. Ethan knelt beside the child. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said, his voice loud over the storm. The child flinched but did not respond. Its lips were slightly open, its breath weak. Ethan could see frost on its skin. It was freezing to death. He didn't have time to think. He pulled off his thermal coat and wrapped it around the small alien. The child was so light, too light. Ethan could feel its ribs beneath his fingers. It was starving. The child blinked up at him, confused but too weak to resist. It tried to speak, but only a soft whimper came out. "It's okay," Ethan said. "You're going to be okay." He lifted the child into his arms, holding it close to share his body heat. The little creature curled against his chest, its shivering slowing slightly. Ethan looked around. He couldn't stay here. The storm was getting worse, and carrying the child slowed him down. He needed to find shelter, fast. He checked his scanner again. It was weak, struggling against the storm's interference. But after a few seconds, it picked up something, a faint signal from a possible cave half a mile away. It wasn't much, but it was his only option. Gritting his teeth, Ethan started walking. Each step was harder than the last. The snow reached up to his knees, slowing him down. The wind screamed, threatening to knock him over. The child in his arms remained silent, too weak to make a sound. Then he heard something else. A low, deep growl. Ethan stopped. His entire body tensed. The sound did not come from the storm. He turned his head, scanning the blizzard. Something was out there. A shadow moved in the snow, a huge shape barely visible through the white mist. Another growl. Closer this time. Ethan's heart pounded. His fingers tightened around the child. The storm was not the only danger on this planet. Something was hunting them, and it was getting closer. The rescue and the chase. The storm did not let up. If anything, it became angrier, howling through the frozen wasteland like a wounded beast. The air was thick with ice and snow, making it nearly impossible to see. But Ethan Carter didn't have time to think about the cold. He had an alien child in his arms, half frozen, barely breathing. and something was following them. Ethan kept his steps steady, forcing himself to move despite the deep snow pulling at his legs. The child, wrapped tightly in his thermal coat, shivered against his chest. Its large silver eyes fluttered open for a second before closing again. "Stay with me, kid," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to the child. His wrist scanner beeped, showing the cave was still half a mile away. Too far. He wasn't sure if the child would last that long. Then, a sound. A deep guttural growl. Low but powerful. Ethan froze. The wind roared around him, but he knew what he had heard. Slowly, he turned his head. Through the thick curtain of snow, he saw a massive shape moving. Something dark, something huge. It was barely visible. A shadow among the ice. But it was there, and it was coming closer. Ethan swallowed hard. He had seen many dangerous creatures across different planets, but he had never seen one like this. He didn't know its name. He didn't want to. His instincts screamed at him to run. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he took a careful step backward, making sure not to disturb the snow too much. Predators could sense fear. They could smell desperation. The growl came again, louder this time. Closer. Ethan's grip on the child tightened. Then, the thing moved. A massive clawed foot stepped forward, crunching through the snow. A second later, another. It was big. Too big. The wind shifted just enough for Ethan to get a better look. The creature was covered in thick, spiked ice armor, its body blending perfectly with the environment. Its eyes, small but fierce, glowed like frozen fire. Its breath came out in misty clouds, hot against the freezing air. And then, it charged. Ethan didn't think. He just ran. The snow tried to hold him back, but adrenaline pushed him forward. The child in his arms whimpered softly, barely aware of the danger. Ethan didn't dare look back. He could hear the beast's massive feet pounding against the ground. It was fast, faster than something its size had any right to be. A sharp crack tore through the air, the creature's claws slamming into ice just inches behind him. Too close. Ethan pushed himself harder, forcing his legs to move. His scanner beeped again. The cave was just ahead. Another growl. This time, it was a roar, a sound so loud it shook the very ground beneath him. The cave entrance appeared through the blizzard, a dark, jagged hole in the side of a frozen cliff. One last sprint. Ethan lunged forward, diving into the cave just as the beast's massive claws swiped the air behind him. He hit the ground hard, rolling over to shield the child from the impact. The monster stopped at the entrance, its glowing eyes staring in. For a moment, Ethan thought it might follow him inside. But it didn't. Instead, it let out a low, rumbling growl, one that sounded almost angry. Then, slowly, it backed away into the storm. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. He waited, listening. The wind screamed outside, but the beast was gone. Finally, he exhaled. His arms were still wrapped around the child. The little alien's breathing was faint, but steady. They were safe. For now. Ethan sat up and adjusted his grip on the child. The cave was dark, but not empty. The walls were smooth, almost unnatural, like something had carved them long ago. He frowned. "What is this place?" A small voice answered. "Home." Ethan's blood ran cold. The child was awake, and it had just spoken its first word. Outside, the storm raged on. But Ethan suddenly had a feeling that the real danger had only just begun. The ice beast attacks. Ethan's breath came in heavy, sharp gasps as he leaned against the smooth, icy wall of the cave. The blizzard outside howled like an angry animal, and the world beyond the narrow entrance was nothing but swirling snow and an endless cold void. But inside, the silence was almost eerie. Only the soft, labored breathing of the alien child in his arms broke the stillness. He looked down at the small figure nestled against his chest. The child's silver eyes were closed, its body limp with exhaustion and frostbite. Ethan couldn't help but feel a strange mix of pity and responsibility. This was a creature from another world, a child of another species, and yet it had found its way to him in the middle of an unforgiving storm. He was all it had now. The warmth of his body was keeping the child alive, but not for much longer. If they didn't get to shelter or find a way to treat its frostbite, the child would die. He had to do something, and fast. Suddenly, a faint sound broke through the stillness. A scratching noise, like claws scraping across rock. Ethan's muscles tensed. He froze, his eyes darting to the cave entrance. He knew that sound. He had heard it earlier, when the creature had been chasing them. The ice beast, it was still out there. His heart pounded in his chest. The growl that followed was low and rumbling, echoing through the cave like distant thunder. The sound seemed to vibrate through the walls, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. The creature was back. Ethan stood quickly, carefully placing the child down on the ground. He drew his laser pistol from his side, his hand steady despite the adrenaline rushing through his veins. He wasn't sure if the weapon would do much against something as massive and powerful as that creature, but it was all he had. He stepped toward the entrance, crouching low, his eyes scanning the darkness outside. The growls grew louder. The creature was circling the cave, trying to figure out a way in. Ethan knew it wouldn't stop until it had the child, its scent still fresh on the wind. The growl turned into a roar, deafening in its intensity. The ground seemed to shake as the beast made its move. Ethan didn't have time to think. He ducked into the shadow of the cave, hoping to remain hidden long enough for the creature to move away. He wasn't about to become its next meal. But the creature wasn't fooled. Its massive form appeared in the storm, blocking the entrance to the cave. Ethan could see its spiked, ice-covered body, covered in thick armor. Its eyes burned with fury, glowing like ice-cold fire. The creature sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring. It had caught their scent. With a vicious snarl, the creature lunged, its claws slicing through the air toward the entrance. Ethan's heart raced. He scrambled backward, instinctively pulling the child to safety. The beast's claws scraped the icy walls of the cave, tearing through the rock like paper. Ice and dust exploded into the air, and for a moment, Ethan thought the entire cave would collapse. "Stay back," Ethan shouted, his voice echoing through the cavern. He aimed his pistol at the creature, firing several shots. The beams hit the beast's thick hide, but they barely made a mark. The creature roared in rage, more determined now than ever. Its claws struck the entrance again, and Ethan dove backward, barely avoiding the attack. His heart was racing, and sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the freezing cold. The creature wasn't going to leave until it had what it wanted. Ethan was out of options. There had to be something else. He looked around desperately, searching for anything that could help. Then he saw it. Along the cave's far wall, something glinted in the dim light. It was a control panel, embedded deep in the ice. A series of strange symbols were etched around it, and a faint, pulsing light emanated from its center. Ethan wasn't sure what it was or what it could do, but it was the only chance they had. "Come on," he muttered, rushing toward the panel. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to try. He reached the panel and pushed his fingers against the smooth surface. The symbols flickered to life, responding to his touch. A deep, low hum filled the air as the ground beneath him began to shift. The cave seemed to come alive, and Ethan's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Before he could react, the ground split open with a violent crack. The cave floor dropped beneath his feet, and he was thrown to the ground with the child still in his arms. The creature roared again, but this time it was too late. The floor opened into a hidden chamber deep beneath the surface, and the entrance above began to close. The ice beast howled in frustration as the gap between it and its prey widened. It tried to reach through, but its claws scraped uselessly against the stone, unable to follow. Ethan's breath was ragged as he looked around. The chamber was vast, too large to be natural. The walls were lined with strange, alien technology, glowing softly in the dark. The air was warm, almost humid, in contrast to the frozen world above. For a moment, Ethan just sat there, stunned by the sudden change. They were safe, for now. The child stirred in his arms, its silver eyes opening slowly. It looked around the chamber, a quiet whimper escaping its lips. Ethan brushed a lock of ice-blue hair from its face and spoke softly. "We're safe. For now." The child looked up at him, its expression hard to read. Then, with a quiet voice, it whispered, "Thank you." Ethan blinked. For the first time since finding the alien child, he felt a small flicker of hope. They had made it this far. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it out of this alive. But even as the words left his lips, a dark, unsettling thought crept into his mind. This was no accident. The creature hadn't been hunting them by chance. It had been searching for the child. And if the beast was looking for it, there was a reason. A reason that would change everything. The hidden truth. The chamber was quiet, save for the soft hum of the alien technology around them. Ethan couldn't help but stare at the walls, where glowing lines of symbols pulsed with a faint light. It was as if the very air around them was alive with energy, a strange, alien life force that he didn't understand. The warmth of the space contrasted with the cold world above, and for the first time since he had found the child, Ethan felt a fleeting sense of safety. But that feeling didn't last long. Ethan gently placed the alien child on the ground, wrapping his arms around his knees, trying to catch his breath. The adrenaline from their escape still ran through his veins. He had no idea how long they had been running from the ice beast, but now, in the eerie quiet of the chamber, he realized how much danger they had narrowly escaped. The sheer size of that creature. It was a wonder that they hadn't been torn apart by its claws. The child was still breathing faintly, its little chest rising and falling. Its large, glowing silver eyes seemed dull, as though the events had exhausted it more than he realized. He needed to help it. He leaned closer to the child, speaking softly. "Hey, kid, we're safe for now. You're going to be okay." For a moment, the child didn't react. It just lay there, eyes half closed. Then, slowly, its gaze shifted to meet his. Its expression was hard to read, a mix of pain, confusion, and something else. Something that felt much older than its small, fragile body suggested. The child opened its mouth, its voice barely more than a whisper. "You should leave." Ethan frowned. "Leave? I'm not going anywhere. I'm not just going to abandon you." The child's eyes glowed a little brighter. It took a deep breath, its voice trembling as it spoke again. "I'm not what you think I am." Ethan didn't know what the child meant by that, but he had a feeling it wasn't just being vague. The more he looked at it, the more he realized that this creature wasn't just some innocent being caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was something deeper at play here, something that didn't make sense. He sat back on his heels, looking around the chamber. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, patterns that were completely alien to him, but they seemed to tell a story about a lost civilization. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and at the top of it lay a shimmering crystal, almost like a jewel glowing with an otherworldly light. As his eyes moved over the strange architecture, Ethan began to piece together something unsettling. The ruins weren't just ruins, they were ancient, older than anything he had ever seen or even read about in his time as an explorer. This wasn't just some random outpost or hidden shelter. This was a lost city, built by a species that no longer existed, long before humans had even stepped foot on this distant planet. The child's voice broke through his thoughts again. "The beings that follow me, they will not stop. They know where I am. They know what I am." Ethan's heart sank. He had already seen the ice beast, but the child's words hinted at something much darker. The child was being hunted, not just by wild creatures, but by something much more dangerous, something intelligent. And if they were following it, if they had tracked it to this cave, then they weren't ordinary predators. They were looking for something more than just food. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his voice soft but urgent. "Who are these beings? Why are they after you?" The child closed its eyes for a moment, its silver glow dimming. "I am the last of my kind." Ethan's mind raced. "Last of your kind?" The child nodded, its voice barely audible. "We were the guardians, protectors of the ancient ones. We kept the power. But now, they want it." Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. "The power? What power?" The child seemed to struggle with its words, as if it wasn't sure how much it should reveal. Finally, it spoke again, its voice filled with sorrow. "The crystal. The one you see before you. It is not just a stone. It is a key to the energy of the stars themselves, the ones who hunt me. They are not just beasts. They are hunters seeking to take the power that was once ours. They want to control it. They want to destroy everything." Ethan's mind struggled to keep up. A key to the stars. Energy that could control the universe itself. The gravity of the situation was beginning to sink in. He had thought he was just rescuing an innocent creature from a storm. But now, it seemed like he had stumbled into something far, far bigger than he could have imagined. The child's eyes flickered, growing even dimmer now. The guardians protected the power for millennia. But now, I am the last. The others are gone, and I am all that remains. Ethan stared at the child. It was small, fragile, and seemed so innocent. But now it was clear that there was a vast history behind it, a history of something far greater and more dangerous than anything he had encountered. And the beings hunting it weren't just after an innocent life. They were after something ancient, something powerful, and something that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. The child's eyes softened, and it spoke again. "You must protect the crystal. If they get it, the galaxy will fall. If I fall, it will be lost forever." Ethan nodded slowly, a deep sense of responsibility settling in his chest. The child wasn't just some helpless creature. It was the last hope of an entire civilization. And if it was telling the truth, the stakes were much higher than a simple alien child's survival. He looked at the glowing crystal, understanding now that this wasn't just a relic. It was the key to something powerful enough to turn the tides of war, to shape the future of the galaxy. And now, it was in his hands. "Don't worry," Ethan said, determination settling in his voice. "I'll protect you. And I'll protect this." The child gave a faint, weary smile, its glow dimming once again. "Thank you, Guardian." Ethan didn't fully understand what it meant by that yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The danger wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. A dangerous escape. Ethan sat still, his back pressed against the smooth, icy wall of the chamber. The child lay beside him, resting in the warmth of the hidden chamber beneath the surface. The glowing crystal in the center of the room pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of an ancient, forgotten world. For the first time since he had found the child, Ethan allowed himself to breathe, but only for a moment. His mind was still reeling from what the child had revealed to him, the truth about its species, the power of the crystal, and the terrifying hunters that were closing in on them. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a faint, distant rumble. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the storm above. The ground seemed to vibrate under his feet, and the chamber hummed with an unsettling energy. It was as if the ancient systems beneath the ice were waking up, responding to some unknown force. The child stirred beside him, its silver eyes flickering open. The glow had dimmed significantly, but its gaze still held a deep, ancient sadness. It looked at Ethan, then slowly toward the glowing crystal, as if sensing something. "They're coming." The child's voice was quiet, but the urgency was unmistakable. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? How do you know?" The child looked up at him, its eyes narrowing with a mixture of fear and wisdom. "They can feel the power. They're tracking it." Ethan's mind raced. The child had said that they were the last of its kind, but it seemed like the hunters weren't just after the child. They were after the crystal, the key to unimaginable power. And if those hunters were tracking them, it meant they were closer than ever. Ethan rose to his feet, his hand instinctively going to the blaster at his side. The ancient ruins around him seemed almost alive, as if they were reacting to the threat approaching them. The walls hummed with energy, a deep, vibrating pulse that seemed to call out to something far beyond the small chamber they were in. "How much time do we have?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension. "Not much." The child's voice was barely above a whisper, but its words were laced with finality. "They will be here soon." Ethan glanced around the room, looking for any escape route. The chamber seemed like a dead end, but he had to find a way out. He couldn't let the child, and that crystal, fall into the hands of whatever hunted them. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. The ground shook beneath them, and the walls trembled with the force of the impact. The entrance to the chamber, hidden under layers of ice and rock, began to crack. The sound of grinding stone reverberated through the air as the walls shifted, revealing a path. The child's eyes flickered with something akin to recognition. "They're here." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel it. The hunters were close. It wasn't just the sound of the wall breaking apart. It was the unmistakable presence of something otherworldly, something dangerous and determined. He reached for the child, grabbing it gently but firmly. "We need to move now." The child's small body shuddered in his arms, but it didn't resist. It understood the danger. With its guidance, Ethan moved toward the newly revealed passage. The walls of the chamber opened, revealing a narrow tunnel leading deeper into the underground ruins. It was the only way out. Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, his mind working on overdrive. The storm outside might have been raging, but it was nothing compared to the storm of danger that was closing in on them now. The passage was tight, and the air inside was damp with the weight of centuries of disuse. The child whispered softly in his arms, its words barely audible, but Ethan caught the meaning. "Follow the path. It will lead you out." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure how much he could trust the child's words. He had no choice but to follow it. As they moved deeper into the ruins, the walls around them seemed to pulse with a strange energy, the very air charged with a power he couldn't understand. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind. Heavy, deliberate steps. The hunters had found them. Ethan quickened his pace, but the tunnel began to narrow. The deeper they went, the harder it became to move. The walls of the tunnel felt as though they were closing in on him. It was as if the very ruins were trying to keep them trapped within. He heard the beasts roar, low and guttural, reverberating through the stone walls. The ice beast, it had followed them, and it was not alone. There were others. He could hear the growls, the snarls, the sound of something large and terrifying moving through the ruins. Panic began to rise in Ethan's chest. They couldn't outrun them. The hunters were too fast, too powerful. He had to find a way out. And fast. Just as he thought they were cornered, the tunnel widened into another vast chamber. This one was different. It wasn't a place of forgotten ruins. It was a hangar. A massive alien ship lay dormant in the center of the room, its sleek, metallic surface gleaming under the dim light of the chamber. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. This was no ordinary ship. It was advanced, far beyond anything human technology had ever produced, and it was their only hope. The child's voice was steady, even as the sounds of the hunters grew louder. "The ship. It will take you beyond their reach." Ethan didn't waste a second. He rushed toward the ship, setting the child down carefully on the ground as he reached for the control panel. The panel flickered to life under his touch, its symbols glowing in a soft blue light. He pressed a series of buttons, praying he was doing it right. The ship's engines hummed to life. Ethan's heart leaped in his chest. The hunters were getting closer. He could hear their claws scraping against the stone as they closed in. There wasn't much time. The ship's massive door slid open with a low hiss, revealing the sleek interior. Ethan motioned for the child to follow. They had to get inside, or they were all dead. As the child stepped forward, its small hand reaching for the entrance, the ship's engines roared to life. They were not alone anymore. They had a chance to escape. But the hunters were still coming. Ethan and the child rushed aboard the ship, the door slamming shut behind them. The ship began to lift off the ground, rising slowly at first, then faster as the massive engines propelled them upward. Through the ship's viewports, Ethan caught a final glimpse of the ruins below, and the dark figures emerging from the shadows. They were not going to let them go without a fight. As the ship ascended into the cold, dark sky, Ethan glanced at the child beside him. Its silver eyes were filled with something new, hope, perhaps, or maybe just the relief of survival. But in the pit of his stomach, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. The hunters were relentless, and wherever they went, the hunt would continue. The Lost Guardian. The ship was silent, its engines humming steadily as it ascended into the dark expanse of space. The stars outside the viewport stretched into distant points of light, their cold glow reflecting off the ship's smooth metallic surface. Ethan sat in the pilot's seat, his hands on the controls, his mind racing as the ship drifted farther away from the planet's surface. The storm, the ice beast, the ancient ruins, they were all behind them now. But that didn't mean they were safe. The child, still small and fragile in his arms, sat beside him, its eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Its silver eyes were filled with an ancient sorrow, the weight of something far older than Ethan could comprehend. As the ship moved through the silent void of space, Ethan tried to make sense of everything that had happened. He had stumbled into the middle of something far greater than he had ever imagined. The child wasn't just some lost alien. It was the last of the Guardians, the protectors of a lost civilization. And the crystal, the key to the energy of the stars, was no ordinary relic. It was a source of power, a force that could shape the very fabric of the universe. And yet Ethan still had no answers. Who were the hunters? What did they want with the crystal? Why had the child been targeted? The child's soft voice broke his thoughts. "The ship will take us far." Its words were barely above a whisper, but they carried a sense of certainty. "It will take us to a place of safety. But you must understand, Guardian, the danger is not over." Ethan turned to the child, his brow furrowing. "I'm listening. What do you mean, Guardian?" The child's silver eyes met his, and for a moment, Ethan could see a flicker of something almost like recognition. "You are not just a stranger to this world. You are a part of it now." The child's voice was steady, and yet there was something mournful in its tone. "The Guardians chose you." Ethan stared, stunned. "What are you talking about? I'm not a Guardian." The child's gaze never wavered. "You are now." It paused, as though gathering the strength to continue. "You have the power to protect the crystal, to protect what is left of my people." Ethan's heart pounded. "I'm no hero. I'm just a guy who got caught up in something way over my head." The child's expression softened. "You are more than that. You have been chosen by the crystal itself. You are its protector now, and you must keep it safe. The hunters will not stop. They will chase us through the stars, seeking the power they desire. You must learn to fight for it." Ethan's head swam. Chosen. Him. A simple explorer with no understanding of alien cultures or galactic politics. There had to be some mistake. But as he glanced at the child, something deep inside him stirred. There was an undeniable pull, a connection. The child wasn't just asking for help. It was telling him that he had a purpose now. Whether he liked it or not, he was involved in something far bigger than himself. "But I don't know anything about this. I don't know how to protect the crystal, how to fight these hunters." Ethan's voice trembled slightly. The child looked at him with a sorrowful understanding, its eyes dimming for a moment. "You will learn. There is much more to you than you realize. You are a Guardian, and you must carry the legacy of my people." Ethan felt a strange weight settle on his shoulders. The legacy of an ancient civilization. The responsibility to protect a powerful artifact. It was too much to absorb in one moment. Yet, deep down, he knew he didn't have a choice. If he didn't protect the crystal, if he didn't defend this child, then the galaxy would fall to the hunters. The child's voice interrupted his thoughts. The ship is ready. It is time to go to the place of the old ones. The last place where we can be safe. The words sounded so final, so full of purpose. Ethan glanced at the control panel. The ship was heading into the cold emptiness of deep space, but there was more to the journey than simply fleeing from the hunters. The child was guiding him, but to where? Ethan didn't have time to ask. The ship shuddered suddenly, a warning signal flashing across the console. A red light blinked urgently, and a deep, low hum filled the cabin, followed by a series of beeps. "What's happening?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp. "They found us." The child's words were calm, as though it had been expecting this moment. It turned toward Ethan, its silver eyes narrowing. "They have tracked us. The hunters are closing in." Ethan gripped the controls tighter, his mind racing. He had no idea how to fight something like this. He barely knew how to fly the ship. "We're too far from help," Ethan muttered, his gaze scanning the controls. The child didn't answer right away. Instead, it raised one small hand, its fingers glowing faintly as it reached toward the ship's control panel. The humming sound of the ship grew louder, and suddenly, a map of the galaxy flickered to life on the screen. It wasn't a map Ethan recognized. This was something older, more ancient, far beyond the reach of modern human technology. "We are heading to a hidden place, a place where the crystal can be protected." The child spoke with the authority of someone who knew this journey far too well. Ethan swallowed hard. "Where?" "It is called the Nexus." The child's voice took on a darker tone. "A place between the stars. Between worlds. The hunters will not be able to find it, unless they know how to enter the Nexus, and they will stop at nothing to find it." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had heard of the Nexus. It was a place of legend, spoken of only in whispers among ancient cultures. No one knew exactly where it was. Some said it was a mythical realm, lost to time. Others believed it was a place of unimaginable power. But what was clear now was that the child's people, the Guardians, had known it well, and they had hidden the key to the galaxy's future in the form of a child. Ethan wasn't sure how he was supposed to protect the child, much less navigate them to this mythical nexus. But as the red warning lights blinked faster, he realized one thing. There was no turning back. The hunters were here. And this was only the beginning. The final choice. The ship cut through the cold emptiness of space, its engines humming with a steady rhythmic pulse. Ethan had been flying for hours, his eyes glued to the blinking red lights of the control panel. The child beside him remained silent, its small form curled against the seat, still recovering from the exhausting events that had led them here. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed distant, indifferent to the storm that had now engulfed their lives. But Ethan couldn't ignore the growing sense of impending doom. The hunters were still out there, and they were closing in. No matter how fast he flew, no matter how far they traveled, it felt like they were always just one step behind. They had no choice but to keep moving. There was no safety, no guarantee of refuge. The child's voice broke the silence, soft and distant, like a whisper carried on the wind. "They will come for you, for both of us." Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. "I know. They'll stop at nothing. But what do you want me to do? How can I stop them?" The child lifted its head, its silver eyes glowing faintly. "You must choose. The crystal is more than a key. It is a power that can change everything. If the hunters take it, they will control the stars. They will control us all." Ethan's stomach tightened at the weight of the words. He had heard the child's warning before. But now, with the hunters drawing closer, the situation was becoming clearer, darker. The crystal wasn't just an artifact. It was the heartbeat of the universe itself, Whoever controlled it would have the power to shape the course of history, to bend time, space, and matter to their will. He glanced at the child. I don't know how to use it. I don't even know if I can stop them. They have the firepower, the numbers. What do I have? The child's gaze softened. You have the will to fight, and you have the power of the guardians. You are not alone. Ethan wasn't sure whether the child was offering him comfort or merely stating a truth that had been chosen for him. It had told him time and time again that he had been chosen, but in that moment, Ethan couldn't feel the weight of that responsibility as anything but overwhelming. What if he failed? What if, in his effort to protect the child, he lost everything? A sudden alarm broke his thoughts. The console flashed red. The words, hostile ship, DKTCTD, blinking at him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. They're here. The words left his mouth in a rush. The child didn't flinch, its silver eyes turning toward the controls. There are more than one. They have come in force. Ethan's hands hovered over the controls. The ship was fast, faster than most, yet the incoming force was greater than he had imagined. The distance between them and the enemy ship was shrinking at an alarming rate. He knew that if they didn't act fast, they would be surrounded. There would be no escape. The red light of the warning blinked urgently again. Ethan had to make a decision, and fast. He could run, try to outrun them, hide in the vastness of space. But the child had already warned him. The hunters would never stop. They would chase them until the end of time, until the crystal was in their hands, or Ethan could make his stand, face them head on. It was a choice only he could make. Ethan clenched his jaw, his grip tightening around the controls. Where do we go? He asked, trying to steady his voice. The child's eyes glowed a little brighter, as if it had anticipated the question. The Nexus. It is our only hope. It is a place hidden beyond reach, but only those with the key can enter. You will need the power of the crystal. He hesitated. The Nexus was their only option. But there was a catch. He didn't know how to unlock its power. He didn't even know where to begin. He wasn't a guardian, not really. But the child's unwavering faith in him pushed him to make his choice, if not now, when? Ethan's hand slammed against the panel, triggering the ship's defensive systems. He was no pilot. He was a scientist, an explorer, but he was also a survivor. The ship's engines roared to life, its weapons coming online with a sharp hiss. Hold on, he shouted to the child as he spun the ship around, heading straight into the path of the enemy fleet. The child didn't move, its expression serene. We are the last of the Guardians, but you will not be alone. The ship rocketed forward, narrowly dodging a barrage of energy blasts that streaked across space toward them. The force of the impact sent Ethan's body jerking against the seat, but he held his focus. The ship was shaking, but it held together. This was it. This was the final push. But just as they reached the outer edge of the enemy fleet, a massive explosion erupted across the hull. Ethan gritted his teeth as the ship veered off course. The alarms blared, and the ship's controls began to flicker, losing power. We can't take much more of this, Ethan shouted, his voice tight with panic. But even as the ship bucked under the pressure, he noticed something strange, something the child did not mention. The crystal at the center of the ship, at the heart of everything, began to glow with an otherworldly brilliance, pulsing with the kind of energy Ethan couldn't begin to understand. His mind raced. Was this the power the child spoke of? In that instant, the ship's systems seemed to shift, and Ethan felt the energy surge through the control panels. He didn't know what he was doing, but his hands moved instinctively, pressing a sequence of buttons he didn't remember learning. The ship's shields flickered and came back online. Stronger, faster. The enemy ship that had been closing in on them shuddered as if struck by an unseen force. Its engine sputtered, and the energy blasts that were intended to tear the ship apart now deflected harmlessly into the void. You did it, Guardian. The child's voice was calm, but there was a sense of reverence in it. It looked at Ethan as though it had always known he had it within him. The ship, now energized by the power of the crystal, wasn't just running from the hunters anymore. It was fighting back. Ethan looked at the console. His heart was pounding in his chest. The enemy ships had been repelled, but he knew they wouldn't stop. The chase had just begun. The hunters were persistent, and there was no guarantee of survival. But Ethan had made his choice. He had chosen to face the darkness head-on, to protect the crystal, to protect the child. And no matter what happened next, there would be no turning back.